Hello and welcome to the Today's Homeowner Weekly Podcast. We're here to help you with the challenges we all face as homeowners. I'm Danny Lipford.
And I'm Joe Truini. And each week, Danny and I are here on the podcast to answer any and all home improvement questions.
And we want to hear from you. Send us your questions or comments at todayshomeowner.com/podcast.
Okay, Danny, let's get started.
Today's Homeowner Podcast is brought to you by the Home Depot. How doers get more done. This week, we look at how you can change a traditional deadbolt into one that's wireless enabled. You'll be amazed at how easy it is to install it and all the different things that you can do as a result of that. Very, very easy and also very inexpensive. Hey, something we want to caution you about, if you're thinking of replacing an existing light fixture with a ceiling fan, we need to share with you a few things you have to be very careful with to make sure that ceiling fan stays where you put it. Hey, you know, something we talk about a lot is black mold, mildew inside the home. Not a fun subject to talk about, but a pretty serious one. And one area that mold gathers a good bit is if you have any condensation that forms around any of your ductwork registers. It can happen, and we'll tell you exactly what you need to do if you're experiencing that at your home. Also, what do you do on your driveway if you have wood expansion joints? Sooner or later, they're going to deteriorate. Do you need to replace them with wood, or are there other alternatives? We'll cover all of that as well.
And I've got a simple solution on how to pry moldings off your wall. I'm talking about like baseboard or chair rail or even window or door casing. How to pry it off the wall without damaging the drywall surface.
Deconstruction is just as important as construction, so we'll share some great tips with you. Let's get started. Let's go right back to the Today's Homeowner Hotline. Brian is on the line with us from New Jersey. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Love your show.
Hey, I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Appreciate
My
that.
My question is, I want to replace the deadbolt on our front door with one of those programmable electronic deadbolts, and I'm wondering what features I should be looking for and whether this is something I can install myself, because I'd rather not have to hire somebody to put it in if possible.
You definitely wouldn't have to hire anybody. It's very, very simple, but especially now you're replacing an existing deadbolt?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that makes it even easier because all of those holes are, pretty standard. So you're not even going to have to hardly break out any tools other than just probably a Phillips head screwdriver is probably all you'll need, possibly a razor knife. You always need a razor knife when you...
Just to open up the package.
That's what I'm talking about.
Or a chainsaw, depending on how difficult
Whatever you get, sometimes you got to break out a hatchet in order to hatchet through all of that molded plastic stuff. But anyway, once you get past that, and assuming you don't get injured by doing that, but it's pretty easy. Now, as far as which one to choose, that's really a good question. I know Joe may have some suggestions on that, but I know that, and I don't recall the branding of the ones that we installed. I know we've used a lot of Schlage locks over the years, and they have some really good ones. But I'll tell you what, once you get it, you'll wonder how you ever did without it, because you never really have to worry about having a key around. You don't really have to hide a key anymore, because you can always have someone, if they need to get in, or you get locked out, or you need to actually open the door remotely from wherever you are. All of that is pretty much standard with some of the wireless ones. Do you have any other suggestions, Joe, in terms of branding or anything?
Yeah, well, most manufacturers, Brian, have, at this point, because they've been around for a few years now, have sort of like a good, better, best. So sometimes you have to, just let price be a indication of quality. So you wouldn't want to get the cheapest one, but you certainly don't need the most expensive one. I would think for between $80 and $120, you could probably get a really good one. And as Danny mentioned, the main benefit is that you don't need a key, right? You simply enter a passcode. But some of them do come with a keypad and a slot for a key. And you might wonder, well, why do I need a key if it's got a keypad? Well, it operates by battery. What happens when the battery dies? How do you get in your house?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's why you need the key. So that would be one feature to look for. And then, and Danny had mentioned that you can open it and change the codes using your smart device if it's a smart electronic deadbolt. Some of them aren't compatible with smart technology, so you'd pay extra for that. Another nice feature is a weak battery indicator light. So if the battery is dying, a light will come on so you know to replace the battery. And the battery's on the inside, obviously, and you just pop it off and replace it. Those are probably the few things you want to look for. Some of them have push-button keypads. Some of them have touch pads. Most people prefer the touch pads because they are a sleeker look. They're just a flat look. And some of them, the doors will when you walk out, a lot of them, Brian, you can program so it closes automatically, so you don't have to punch in the code, which is a really nice feature. So you can use the code to get in, and when you leave, you just close the door. And if you wait, you'll hear within 5 or 6 seconds, you'll hear the bolt will get thrown and the door will be locked. So those are a couple of things to look for. And of course, as Danny mentioned, if you already have an existing deadbolt, these things just slide right into the same hole.
Great. Well, thanks a lot. It gives me a lot to think about.
How soon are you going to do this project?
Well, I was hoping in the next week or two.
Yeah,
okay.
Good.
Well, don't lose your key between now and then.
That's right. Well, good, Brian. I'm glad we were able to give you a little bit of insight on that. Definitely a great way to go. Something that you'll, as I mentioned earlier, once you get it in there, you'll be glad you did and wondered how you did without it. So best of luck on that. If we can help you any other way, let us know.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Hey, let's go right to Connecticut. Lincoln is on the line right now with a great question. Lincoln, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure, man.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So I have a sunroom out in the back of my house, and there are some light fixtures in the ceiling, and I want to replace one of those with a ceiling fan. And I'm not sure if it's safe to attach the fan to the electrical box that's there, if I need to do something different with that.
Okay. And in a sunroom like that, I kind of tend to think you probably don't have access to the attic, I assume.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, there's several different ways to go. First of all, you can take the light fixture down, make sure you're turning the power off so that you're not working with a hot box there, and make sure that it is off at the breaker box. And then look at the electrical box itself and just play with it a little bit. Get up there real close with a flashlight and see if it is screwed straight into a ceiling joist or any blocking. And you can almost kind of pull on it. Might even take pliers and pull on a little bit just to see how substantial it is. And I would say 50% of the time, you'll be in good shape, depending on how old it is. Some of the newer installations will have more of the plastic boxes in it, and maybe some pop-in boxes, as we say, that would not be safe for that. But there's also some other ways. Joe, you're familiar with those expandable type of things that are available that you can, I can't think of what they're called, but you...
Fan brace.
Yeah, fan brace. That you actually fish it up into that small hole.
Yep.
Really innovative way of providing that kind of spot for you.
Yeah, Lincoln, I agree that the first thing to do is take down the light and remove the box that's in there. And the easiest way, what I've found, is I just use my hammer and I turn it upside down and I just press up and bang up using the end of the hammer handle and just knock that box out. It's usually just supported by thin metal brackets that go to the right and left to each joist, or maybe it's nailed into the side of a joist, but you can usually just pop that out. And don't worry about damaging it because you're not going to use it. And then you'll know where the joist is. Hopefully it's really close to a joist. If you don't see it, you can put your hand up there. And what I would recommend is going to the nearest joist, cutting a hole and putting in a fan box, which is it's a pancake style electrical box specifically designed for installation of fans. And it's only 1/2 inch deep, which is the thickness of the sheetrock. And just screw that to the underside, right to the underside of the joist. Now you've got a really strong hold. Now you might say, well, what if I moved it over 5 or 6 inches? Now I have the old hole. Well, to hide that, you can buy a medallion. They just put up against the ceiling and then put the fan in there so you have a little decorative accent above there. If you decide that you want to use the fan brace, then you can use that too. You just slip it up inside the hole, the existing hole, and you just, by hand, you just turn it until it spreads out and has little teeth that dig into the side of each joist. Because the electrical box you have now is only rated to hold 50 pounds, and you need a box that can hold 150 pounds to safely hold the fan. Because, of course, not only is it heavier, but you have all that wobbling around.
Right.
That's what I would do, Lincoln. If there's a joist close enough, even if you have to cut a new hole, that's what I would do. Then, if you don't want to put a medallion up, you can just patch the drywall hole. But the medallion makes it really easy.
Right. Excellent. That's great. Thanks so much for your help. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Our pleasure. We don't want the fan falling on you at any time. That's important there.
Don't want to be decapitated by my fan.
Exactly. Well, Lincoln, have a great success on that project, and also have a great weekend.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thanks,
buddy.
Lincoln.
Thank
Bye.
you. Now, yeah, that's really important. Now, we appreciate homeowners that are very cautious about certain projects like that because, we all tend to kind of get in a hurry sometimes, and that's something you don't want to do on anything that you're working with your home. Make sure you've thought it through, read enough, got enough information, and we're certainly always glad to help. Bruce in Florida says, to keep our attic a little cooler, we have a foil-faced radiant barrier attached to the roof rafters. However, much of the barrier has fallen down and showing signs of wear and tear. Should the barrier be replaced, or do you think we can reattach it somehow? What do you think on that, Joe? Because we always talk about the foil-faced radiant barrier, and so many times it is installed improperly. Well, if it's hanging from your rafters, it's probably not doing you a lot of good.
It's not doing a lot of good, that's right. Yeah, these are just foil-faced. They're like reinforced paper with a foil face, and it's reinforced with nylon like webbing in it. And as long as it's in good shape and the foil's not all ripped and deteriorated or something, I would just staple it back up. Now, Bruce's problem might be that the staple's ripped out. So you could, what I'd recommend is reinforcing the edges of the barrier with duct tape, then staple through the duct tape. The other option is to put up long wooden lattice strips, then screw or nail through the lattice strips into the underside of the rafter to hold it up. But I think I'd start with the duct tape and then just staple through that.
Yeah, certainly. If it's already there, you hate to just eliminate it or not take advantage of some of especially there in a hot climate like Florida. So I would certainly take a look at that. Hey, here's another one from Dan in Mississippi. We're remodeling the first floor of our home, and I need to remove some 12-inch by 12-inch tile from the kitchen and the dining room. The combined area is about 300 square feet. The tile is set into a concrete slab. What's the best and easiest way to remove the tile? Thanks, Danny. We listen to you and Joe each Saturday on WOSM 103.1 in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Keep up the good work. Well, thanks a lot, Dan. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Well, a little bit of work ahead of you there with 300 square feet is
a lot of work. I think
is a fair amount, and certainly that tile is probably glued with a thin set adhesive right to the concrete. Now, concrete that's not treated really absorbs anything that you put on it. And if you put thin set adhesive on it, of course, it's going to soak down into there. That's one of the main reasons it's so hard to remove some of that. Joe, I'll tell you, I can't remember the name of that machine that they have that you can rent that has the chipping blade on the front of it. Fairly heavy machine.
Right.
Certainly about the loudest machine that you can possibly turn on.
Yeah.
And so you definitely need ear protection, eye protection, gloves, and so forth. But if you have this much and you want to kind of take a lot of the frustration out, I would suggest maybe that Dan rent that machine. And like I said, it has this aggressive chipping blade on the front. You get a few of the tiles up, probably take your small sledgehammer and break a few of them up to where you can get it started. And then hopefully that blade will get underneath the thin set enough in order to chip it all out. But you've done a lot of this in a lot of your tile work that you've done.
Yes. Yeah, Dan, Dan, I think what Danny is referring to, I think it's called a breaker. I'm not sure why they call it that, but it's simply an electric jackhammer. But it's pretty big and it's pretty heavy, and it accepts different blades. So tell the rental dealer what you're doing with it, and he'll give you a wider chisel blade, not like a pointed chipper blade. But to make the job, especially since you have 300 square feet, Dan, what I would recommend is there's an accessory. They call it an easy hammer cart. And it's basically like if you can imagine a hand truck that's at an angle, and you slip the breaker into this, and then it has two little handles. You just push it forward. This way, you're not trying to. First, it holds it at the exact right angle. But this way, you're not holding the weight of the tool, which is pretty heavy. So that's what I would recommend. Get the breaker and see if they have the easy hammer cart to go along with it.
All right. Time for our Best New Product segment, brought to you by the Home Depot. How doers get more done. When cordless circular saws first came out, they were kind of a novelty. They were good for some jobs, but certainly no replacement for a corded model. Well, they've gotten much better in the last few years, and the folks at DeWalt have taken it to a whole new level with their new Flexvolt Advantage circular saw. First off, it uses a full-size 7 1/4-inch blade instead of those smaller ones, so the depth of cut matches or exceeds their own corded saw. And the degree of bevel is also equal. But get this battery-powered saw actually has a higher blade speed than the corded version by 300 RPMs. The reason is their battery ID technology. The saw knows when you pair it with their 20-volt or 60-volt Flexvolt batteries, so it'll give give you 77% more power than their regular existing 20-volt circular saw. That power means this saw can do the same work as its corded cousins, and that makes any job you're doing a lot easier. So to get more information on this DeWalt Flexvolt circular saw, head on over to homedepot.com for more information. Right now, we're headed to Kentucky, and Chuck is on the line with a paint question. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Danny and Joe. It's a pleasure to be on, and I appreciate you taking my question.
Of course. Thanks for calling.
It's a good one because, so many times people are, you have a little, something going on with the ceiling, and maybe nobody else sees it, but darn, when you walk into the room, you're going to look at that one spot every single time. Tell us about what's going on at your house.
Exactly, Danny. Well, I think I got a little overzealous with a magic scrubber, as I'm sure I'm not the first one. What happened was I installed a ceiling fan recently, and I noticed after I was done, there was just a few light scuff marks in the ceiling, nothing, too bad. So I went down and got my trusty magic eraser, and I went to town with it. And I was, I looked up, everything looked great. The scuffs were gone. I thought, job done, until the next time I entered into the room and the sun was coming through and I caught the ceiling from an angle. And now there is a shiny halo around the area that I scrubbed. And I wasn't too vigorous with it. I tried to be as gentle as I could. And so like I say, now it's a flat white, typical flat white latex paint on the ceiling. And now there's that kind of shiny halo. And I really don't want to repaint the entire ceiling because it looks gorgeous outside of that if I can help it. So I just wondered if you guys had run across this and maybe if there's a tip or two you could think of.
Well, I tell you, I think this is a classic example of all about luck because, you get a flat ceiling, ceiling flat paint, and even if it's the exact same paint that was used on your ceiling originally, when you paint it on there, maybe it gets on there a little too heavy, maybe too light. The other has faded a little bit. Maybe there's been, something that's caused the ceiling to fade just a little bit, like sun and so forth. So it really is a tough one, and you're really taking a chance at doing anything to it because you put that flat paint on there, it might disappear and look great, or it might make it stand out even more. Joe, I know that a lot of times something I read on some of the stain blocker that you have, the upshot as we call it, with the spray cans that shoot kind of at a 45 for ceilings, that a lot of them actually say on there formulated to match faded ceiling white paint. So, I wonder if we should recommend to Chuck to try that spray or to try flat white or just quit looking up at the ceiling. What do you think?
Yeah, stop looking at the ceiling, Chuck. What are you doing? I'm not sure how they could make that claim. I mean, white paint. If you ever tried to buy white paint, there's like 1,000 shades of white. Right. Since it's a little shiny, Chuck, the first thing I thought is just buffing the area with some fine steel wool. And again, you want to be really gentle and just do it in one spot. I wouldn't do the entire halo around the whole ceiling fan and find out, it looks even worse. So I would do one little area and see if that works. If that helps, but it's not eliminated completely, you maybe step up to some very light hand sanding with like 120, maybe even something finer, 180 grit sandpaper. Because if it's shiny, you want to knock that down to get to the texture of the flat ceiling. Now, every time you do that, of course, you're going to be removing a little bit of paint, even if it's on the microscopic level. So what will that look like? But I would try anything and everything before I painted the whole ceiling. And in fact, if it gets to the point where you have to put paint on just the halo area, I would just do that and see if it does blend in. I'm not sure it will, but with the ceiling fan air and their blades, maybe you won't notice it if it does look a little different. But I think I would try sanding it a little bit or using steel wool. If you have to paint it, but don't paint the whole ceiling, just paint where you need to, where the halo is, and then stand back. And that might be enough to solve the problem you're having.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking. And by the way, Joe, I did try the steel wool, and unfortunately that didn't have an effect. And before I tried the 120 grit sandpaper, I thought I'd check with you gentlemen because I did read some forum posts about trying that. So maybe I'll just go at it real lightly. and
Good.
see if that, it's one of those things, guys, where my fear is I can take something that's not a big problem and turn it into a big problem really quick.
That can happen, no doubt about it.
And that's what I want to avoid.
Yeah, just proceed cautiously there, and we're behind you. We think you can do it. Right now, we're going to go to the Today's Homeowner Hotline. Jeannie's on the line from Virginia. Jeannie, welcome to the show. You're battling the old black mold, huh?
Yes, sir, I am. And actually, this question originated several weeks ago when you had the caller calling about condensation.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
Well, I have that in spades because my metal vents condense. They condense into the ceiling, and that's where I get my creeping black mold.
Oh, boy. Yeah, and it's amazing how that can form. I've been in, like when my girls moved out of the house, little by little as they, started their careers and so forth. They, something like a bathroom that you wouldn't go in for a while. I'd, go in a bathroom or, an area of the house that you don't go in. All of a sudden you look up and you go, how did that happen so quick? But it can with that condensation, as you mentioned, and as we talked about, allowing that water to drip against the drywall that's absorbing it. And then it's gonna turn into mold or mildew or both. So here's what we would recommend on it. First of all, you already know that you really need to insulate that very well. And what I would do, I would almost go to an extreme here and in the attic space clear back any insulation around it, and then I would actually caulk or foam around it where it comes up through your ceiling area. Just go ahead and make sure that is sealed really, really well. Then make sure the insulation wrap that should be around that outlet as well as the ductwork itself is in good shape, and maybe even put a little extra metal foil tape around it, a version of duct tape there to seal it up. And I would even consider, especially if you have a situation that's this bad, a duct mastic. And this is just something that you can buy in a quart. You take a little paintbrush and you basically are encapsulating all of that so that no condensation could possibly take place. So that would be the first thing that I would do. And Joe, in terms of the mold, got to attack that mold and get rid of it first before you do any kind of painting, right?
Yeah, Gene. I mean, I don't care what the paint label says, whether it's a primer or top coat paint. You really have to kill the mold and mildew first, because I would be too concerned that you're going to go through all this trouble and paint the ceiling. It's going to look great, and a week later, the mold goes right through the new paint coat, and then you have to start all over again. So you can kill it with bleach. We often recommend oxygen bleach because it doesn't evaporate as quickly, so it stays on the surface longer and kills the deep spores. And also it's less toxic, so if you get it on your clothes or whatever, it's not going to bleach them out. And then make sure it's really dry, and then you can put on. I would recommend a primer. There's a type of primer we recommend called a restoration primer, and a couple of different manufacturers make it. It's just really super thick, and it's made for blocking almost any kind of stain. So I would put that on the ceiling. And backing up one step to the insulation part, Danny's absolutely right. You have to make sure those ducts are insulated right up to the ceiling vent. But what contractors often don't do is insulate the actual, it's called a boot, but it's that little piece of that rectangular box of sheet metal that attaches the duct to the grill that you see on your ceiling. It's just a little tiny part, but you'd be surprised if that's not fully insulated. That's where the condensation can build up and drip down onto the ceiling, and that moisture is what turns into mold. So, it sounds like a lot of work, but it's something that has to be done because this problem's not going to go away until you eliminate the source of moisture.
Well, Joe, that's exactly what I kind of thought about, and it sounds like you have approved my use of Kills paint to take care of that.
Yeah, Kills is a perfectly good paint. Yeah,
and it's not bad to completely paint the whole ceiling, right? I mean,
no, and you might actually have to, depending on how. I would paint just what I needed to, and then put the top coat on and see if it blends in well enough with the rest of the ceiling. Then fine, but. Often that doesn't work. But kill those spores first, Gene, and then and let it dry 100% dry, and then in fact I wouldn't even paint it for a while. I'd let it go for a few weeks and see if everything remains clean and and mold free.
Right. This is the best time of year to do it because we're just getting rid of our high humidity, which Danny knows about all too well. So.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly right. Well, good way to go about it, and certainly best of luck to you on that. It sounds like you've got it figured out. If we can help you any other way, let us know, and certainly appreciate you listening to the show.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay, take care. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.
All righty, bye-bye now. Hey, I'd like to share with you some information from our friends at Daich Coatings. When homeowners want to update a kitchen, one of the first things they want to do is improve the countertops. Unfortunately, that can also be one of the most expensive projects because the popular replacement options of natural stone and quartz can be pretty pricey to purchase and, of course, have installed. However, there's an easy DIY solution that covers your existing counters with the look of real stone. It's called the SpreadStone Countertop Refinishing Kit from Daich Coatings, and that's DAICH. You can find out more about it at daichcoatings.com. But it's really very, very, very interesting. It's the SpreadStone Countertop Refinishing Kit from Daich delivers the shimmering mineral accents and color highlights found in natural mined rock. But all you have to do is roll it on. Here's the best part. The process doesn't require any artistic skill like some faux finishing options. Best of all, the kit includes everything you need for the entire project. Because the finish contains real stone, these counters have real good durability with resistance to water stains, heat, abrasion, and mold and mildew. In just 3 easy steps, you roll on a base coat, 2 coats of stone coating, and 2 coats of clear sealer. Plus, you only need an hour or 2 of dry time between each of the coats. So, in just one weekend, you can transform your existing laminate countertop, MDF, concrete, or tile countertops into a durable, stain-resistant surface with the design elegance of real stone. If you need an economical solution to updating your counters, check out SpreadStone Countertop Refinishing Kit from Daich Coatings, and you can find out more at homedepot.com or daichcoatings.com. Right now, we're going to shift right to our simple solution from our buddy Joe Truini.
All right, Danny, when prying moldings off a wall, baseboard molding, chair rail, window or door casing, it's too easy to damage the wall because you slip the pry bar behind it, and, even if you're on right in front of a stud, if you pry a little bit, that pry bar can sometimes damage, dent, and cave in the drywall. And I've actually made the mistake of prying a little too hard in between the joists and punched a hole right through the drywall. So here's how to prevent that. All you need to do is slip a 1x4 behind the pry bar, and preferably get one, cut it long enough so it spans at least 2 joists and two studs, and the studs are typically about 16 inches apart. So if you get the 1x4, make it 18 or 20 inches long, because this way, if you're prying against the 2x4, the 1x4, the 1x4 will protect the drywall. Mm-hmm. But if you really put a lot of pressure, you can actually dent the wall with the 1x4. So you put the 1x4 long enough to span the joists. This way, the studs the studs will support it. And that's all you need to do. And then you can just move this 1x4 wherever you need it. And the reason you use a 1x4 not a 2x4 is a 2x4 is a little too fat at 1.5 inches thick. So it's hard to get the leverage you need. So that's it. So use the 1x4 behind your pry bar and stop wrecking that drywall, Danny.
Right. That's right. And actually, that gives you a little more leverage because it acts, as a fulcrum there, and really does provide you a little more leverage. So that's an excellent way to go. Now it's time for our podcast question of the week. This comes from Joe in Mobile, Alabama. I had a company come in and install wood flooring in my master bedroom. Once the install was complete, I have creaky wood floors. Now, the contractor said it's going to continue because it's a floating floor. Is there any way to repair this? Well, I don't know. First of all, what could be happening, and this is something I would hate to think, that a flooring installer would be installing the floor over an existing creaky floor.
Right,
because there's ways that you can, if you're covering something over there, whether it's just a subfloor or whether it's another floor, you can, find those ceiling, the joist, find your joist and be able to screw in, to really stop any of the existing subfloor or existing flooring from creaking. And then certainly the new floor shouldn't creak, but it seems a little odd talking about a wood floor that's floating. I wonder if this might be a laminate floor they're speaking of.
Well, it could be an engineered wood floor, which is a floating floor, which is that I'm I suspect that's what Joe's referring to. And since it's creaking, she lives in Mobile, Alabama, and so the first floor is probably concrete slab, and that wouldn't squeak, right?
No,
So
right.
I suspect this bedroom might be on the second floor, plywood on top of wood joists. So you're right. If it was squeaking before, then yeah, there's not much you can do. It's still squeaking. But a floating wood floor should be put down over a thin, just like 1/8-inch thick rubber underlayment.
Right.
And that would stop squeaking. Now, they also have to put an expansion joint around, expansion space, a gap around the perimeter of the room of at least a 1/2 inch or so this wood can expand and contract. Now, if they didn't do that, you might be hearing that creaking as the wood expands and has no place to go, and it'll start creaking, and in extreme cases, it can actually buckle up. So since this is a new floor, I'd probably live with it for a little while. I have a floating wood floor, engineered wood in about 4 different rooms in my home, I think. And there's very little squeaking. Like any wood floor, maybe you get a little rubbing up and down. But I think I would live with it for a little while and see if the creaking or squeaking stops. But yeah, there's not really much you can do at this point. You're not going to start nailing it down because that would prevent it from expanding and contracting. So unfortunately, Joe, I think you're just going to have to wait this out, and hopefully those squeaks will just go away on their own.
Yeah, hopefully a little bit of settling and a little bit of, acclimation to the house hopefully will quieten it down a little bit. Sorry we didn't have a more direct answer for you there, but that's a tricky one right there, not knowing if the original floor was squeaking or not.
Right.
Hey, we want to get a question from you. If you have any question whatsoever, comment or any tip that's worked well for you, reach out to us at todayshomeowner.com/podcast. And we want to say our appreciation for any of those great reviews that we've gotten over the week. That makes it possible for us to kind of rise up a little bit and reach even more people downloading our podcast each week. So we'd love to hear from you on any review. And again, that's todayshomeowner.com/podcast. I'm Danny Lipford along with my buddy Joe Truini. Thanks for listening to this Today's Homeowner Podcast.